This is Cult Confessions with Christy and Josie. Welcome to our podcast.
Trigger warning. May contain themes of religious trauma and sexual abuse. Disclaimer. All information in this podcast is our opinion based on our experiences. We do not purport any of this content to be inherently factual and believe that each individual has the right to draw their own conclusion.
Hi, I'm Christy.
And I'm Josie. And today on Cult Confessions, we have our first guest. Welcome, Jay. We are super excited to have you.
Hi guys, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be your first guest.
Yay! So we're going to be talking with Jay a little bit today about his experience growing up IFB. As you can see from his shirt, he probably did not have a great experience growing up IFB. So we're going to talk through that. So Jay, you and Christy actually went to the same church for a little while. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly when Christy's family started coming to our church. I was really little.
Yeah,
So
you were
I can really
tiny.
remember Christy's always
Yeah.
existed. So
Love
Yeah,
that.
we moved, I think, I was 12, so I don't know. You've known me since I was 12 then, probably.
yeah,
But yeah, I just remember
as
you
far as I
being
can
little.
remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was probably 4 or 5. Yeah.
One of the things that I remember about your family is you kind of were like one of the more like homely families.
We were a very little household with her, yeah.
Yes, you
Oh my
were.
gosh.
No, for reals.
We were
So,
also one of
okay.
the only families that homeschooled too.
Okay.
Oh
So
yeah,
yeah.
you were. And you guys were you treated differently because you were homeschooled?
Very much so.
Okay.
So when I first started going to Willamette, it was the first pastor that was there, which was Pastor McElroy, and he definitely was very big on the school, and he wasn't
Mm-hmm.
as pro homeschooling at all,
Yeah.
which that really just varies between pastors in the IFB.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
Which it would make sense because if you're not going to their school, then they're not making that income
The
from you going to
income.
school.
exactly,
Yep. That's a big part of it.
Yeah.
no,
So you weren't at Willamette for like the entirety of growing up IFB. You actually went to a lot of different churches. So talk us through a little bit of the timeline, like how many churches you went to and kind of a little bit about your experiences at each one.
oh, I don't even know how many we went to. We went to a ton. So my earliest memories were at Willamette. I don't
Okay.
remember before Willamette. We had gone to a couple IFB churches, like my family had, but I don't remember before Willamette. So we were at Willamette until I was about 6.5, almost 7. And then we went to Berean Baptist Church, which was in Dallas, Oregon at the time.
Okay.
We went there until I was 10. And then we went to Bible Baptist Church in Lebanon, Oregon, which is now Liberty Baptist Church is the name of it, I think. We
Okay.
went there for a couple of years, and then it started just bouncing all over the place. We went to a Southern Baptist church for a little bit. Then we went to an IFB home church for a second. And then we ended up back at Willamette my freshman year of high school. After my parents had gotten divorced, I went to school there for a year, and then we left the IFB kind of, I think it was 2/3 of the way through that school year. But I still went to school there until the end of the school year. And then we were just generic non-denominational Christians after that. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So I think that, I mean, most of your, I'll say, formative years probably happened at Willamette, it sounds like. So,
For sure.
why the church hopping? Like, why did we go to so many different churches?
I think a lot of it had to do with my parents' relationship and
Okay.
I don't know. Some of it was just there were random factors. Willamette, we definitely left because of the whole homeschooling and Christian school rift. It
Mm,
just didn't fit our family's narrative and where we were going.
Yeah.
Um,
I feel like I remember you guys mentioning, yeah, being
yeah,
bullied quite a bit because of it,
yeah,
which is really
definitely.
sad. But
I always felt like really left out when I was little too. Like I can remember a long time ago because of all that like split up in time.
Hmm.
I remember like a very young age because there's such like derivative things that were different at different ages. So it's very easy for me to remember things from a long time ago.
I kind of want you to get into a little bit about when you found out that you were, gay.
I really started realizing that something was different with me when I was like 13, 12, 13, somewhere in there. And it wasn't like a moment of like I realized like, oh, I'm gay. Like it was just like, oh, like I'm kind of attracted to guys and I didn't even really know what that meant at the
Yeah.
time. Um and then 4 or 5 months after my parents split up, that's when I really like started to realize again, like started focusing on it again and I was like,
Hmm.
oh, like I had a very close best friend that like I was just like I have weird like attracted feelings to him and then like um at school is when I really like for the first time like acting gay. I actually went to one of you and I's friend's younger brothers and somebody else like dared me to tell him some stupid Barbie movie quote or something, which like we were always talking about Barbie. But why me and that girl always were talking about them, but we were. And she was like, "Oh, go like say this to him or whatever." And it was only us three in the hallway. I think like the bell had already rang, and so we were like late to class. And I said something to him, and he just like looked at me and like not in a judgmental way or like a rude way, like just very, which I had gotten a lot. Like growing up, I always got like, "Oh, you're gay," like from other people, and
Really?
like it was always accusatory.
Hmm.
And that's the first time somebody ever like asked me like very nicely, like, "Are you gay?"
Yeah.
And I barely got no. Went to the bathroom and bawled my eyeballs out, and that's like
Mm.
when it really hit me, like the label like seems to fit for the first time, and I think that was like really pivotal. That was a very pivotal moment, um, and that was right before we left Willamette. Like we left Willamette. I think that happened in like November, and we left Willamette like in January. So,
Okay.
um, yeah, that's kind of when I first realized it. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, like I remember getting like flushed or like feeling like this weird like the butterflies like around guys from a very young age. Like
Yeah.
we're talking like 5 or 6.
Like crushes. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the very first time I can remember it, I was like 6 and we were at Breeden and we like did this like family camp thing and we were at Silver Creek Falls and we walked past the swimming hole and my mom was like, guys, don't look at the girls in their bikinis. And I just remember thinking to myself, like I am not looking at the girls in their bikinis at all. I am looking at the men with their six packs. It's like the first time I can remember just being like, that's weird. Like, why would I be attracted to girls?
Yeah.
So
And
it
that's
was
kind of how
never
it
like it
happened.
was never normal for you to have any kind of attraction to girls, right?
Uh-uh.
Okay.
And I did date girls and stuff just because like that was what was expected of me. After
Right.
I was done with high school, I never was interested in dating in high school. It just was not something that was on my radar or what I needed to be doing in those moments. Um, and trying to deal with my sexuality and my parents getting divorced and all of that, like there
Yeah.
just was no time to date. So yeah, I've actually dated 2 girls. They're amazing. Love them both. We're still very, very close, but it never got physical. It never was anything like I just felt like I couldn't put them through that. Um,
Yeah.
and both of them, I had conversations with both of them about being attracted to guys. But at the time, I just like thought I was bi. And then at a certain point, I was like, why am I lying to myself? Like,
Yeah.
I don't find girls attractive in the slightest.
Hmm. Were you
At
saying
least in the
that maybe
traditional sense.
just to try to feel more normal? Like,
I think so. Yeah, I think it was a lot of just like what was expected of me and what
hmm.
I mean, I was the youngest child. I had
Yeah.
3 siblings ahead of me who were dating and doing things, and you know, it's
Yeah.
just like there never was the option of like being gay. There was never like that was never suggested to me. I didn't know what that was. Like, other than
Yeah.
like the rude, like nasty little things. Like, and it wasn't
Yeah.
like there were never actual conversations about like what it meant to be like gay or to be attracted to somebody of the same gender as you or to someone who's gender nonconforming. Because
Mhm.
now I would say like I'm I think queer fits better than even gay. Um,
Okay.
but I'm definitely not attracted to cisgendered women in the slightest. So yeah.
Was it hard for you, like growing up, finding that out, and when you finally did know for sure, was that hard?
Yeah. Um, it was hard even before I did know. It was hard to be different all the time. Um, in the IFB, guys and girls are very much like separated. Um,
Hmm.
you're supposed to be friends with guys if you're a guy. You're supposed to be friends with girls if you're a girl. I didn't fit that narrative. Um, so it made it very difficult at times, even with more like IBLP families. Because my family also, we were a part of the Civil War reenacting group in Oregon. And like that was like where we were friends with like a lot of homeschool like fundamentalist families.
And were you, so I just feel like with like, especially with fundamentalism, it's like
Mhm.
one of their biggest agendas is really like speaking about the whole community, really, and like for some reason controlling them. Like as we see that like they don't want them to get married and they don't want them to love each other or anything, right? Like none of that. And to me it's just it's really sad.
And
And
bringing it into situations that it doesn't belong in. Like,
yeah.
I remember that same friend that I was just talking about. I remember at her brother's graduation, like them talking about it because like the Supreme Court had just made gay marriage legal. And like I
Hmm.
still remember that conversation happening. Like, and at that point, I fully knew I was gay. Like it was tough. Like it was really rough because it was like such an agenda for them of like.
Yeah.
Why do you think that they're so against it?
I think a lot of it is honestly to first of all, I think it's like important to note that like they think they're doing what's right.
Hmm.
Um, they definitely see gay people as just like hypersexual,
Yeah.
um, all of that. They don't understand that like you can be in a committed relationship as a gay person. You can have a normal love life and family life and all of that as a gay person. Like it's doable. I've seen it happen. Like
Yeah.
yes, we like to have a good time still, but like it's one of those things like I think being gay doesn't have one like standard like they like to
Yeah.
make it
It's the
seem.
same as like
Um,
being straight. You know, there's
yeah,
like there's those that are like poly and all the things like
yeah,
there's not really any specific way to see things, but I feel like because of them kind of pulling from the Bible and stuff like that, like they're just like man and wife and that's it and like
So
very
I would also like to call out that I
straightforward.
think a lot of those verses in the Bible that they use to justify their homophobia are grossly mistranslated from the
that
original
part.
Hebrew.
Yeah,
I have read so many articles and so many studies. There are so many opinions on what the actual correct translation is. But there are, I mean, that ranges from when you say man should not lie with another man as they lie with a woman, is that it is an abomination. That's their favorite verse. The
hmm,
original Hebrew
that's not what
translation
it says.
it doesn't it doesn't mean
Nope.
homosexuality. That's not what it means. I've read
Yeah, it's
studies where it's quoted as and man should not lie with a boy as in child
hmm,
molesters. Man should not rape a boy
yeah,
as they lie with a woman because that's not okay. I've also read it to mean incest. Like there's so many different ways that you can translate it and they just choose the one that fits their agenda, which is exactly what they accuse the LGBTQ community of doing.
and that's what I was about to say too. Is like I think a lot of it's to distract from what's actually going on, and they don't
Mhm.
actually use the verses in that way because it would also expose a lot of the harm that goes on within their own circles,
Yep.
which I
Yeah.
think is kind of a perfect segue into what else we wanted to talk about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we're going to talk about some deeper stuff. So trigger warning for some upcoming sexual assault themes. So Jay, unfortunately, you experienced some assault within the IFB. Do you want to kind of talk us through your story with that?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to keep it brief, so if I'm rambling, stop me. But we'll start with just like what I remember and then like move backwards a little bit too. Um, so the first thing I ever really remember happening was like I was in Sunday school when I was 12, and at this point, like I had just been moved into youth group, and there was someone that was older than me in the youth group, and it was like before Sunday school started, but like we were all in there just like messing around and like talking. We were all like sitting down, and they like put their hand like on my leg, and like it just got really weird. And at that point, I had never had a conversation about what sexual assault was with anyone. I didn't know what sex was. I didn't know anything. Like nobody had ever
Yeah.
told me like nobody should ever touch you there. None of that. Like I hadn't had those conversations.
No
And
boundaries or anything.
any conversations I had that were like very surface level were very much like strangers, like stranger danger,
Yeah.
which
Well, and it was
that's
also straight. Like all of those
yeah,
conversations, in the
yeah.
rarity that they happen, talk
It's
about
always, yeah, it's
boy,
always going to
girl,
be
man, woman relationships.
And
They
yeah,
never address the potential for a
yeah.
man to assault another man.
And I wasn't gonna address like the gender, but I think like that is an important thing to say is like it was a guy. So like it was
hmm
a very like odd situation. Like
Yeah.
it's not something you would have thought about. And I feel like a lot of the conversations around like sexual assault, at least in my house, were a lot of times like towards men towards women. It wasn't like
Mm-hmm.
a conversation that it could be a guy towards a guy or a girl towards a
Yeah.
guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like those conversations just didn't happen. Um, so yeah, so that and like I said, the big thing was like stranger danger. Whereas I now know that many times predators can be somebody you are very close to.
The majority of
Most
the time, yeah, the
most
majority of
of
the
the time.
time, it is
Yeah.
someone that you know or that is close to you. Stranger
So
danger isn't really, I mean, a
Stranger danger
stranger's
is
almost,
important,
yeah, but it's
but
my
different.
sister
it's
and
I
not
think
all
my sister and
encompassing.
I, we were kind of joking around about how a stranger is almost safer than someone that you know personally.
in certain
um,
cases, most definitely, yeah.
yeah, but I think the biggest thing to take from this is like within the IFB, it's only with a man and a woman, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're already not taught about sex. We're already not taught
Yeah.
about any of it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And we're especially not taught safety
Yeah.
surrounding sex,
Safety is
surrounding,
literally abs, and that's it.
yeah,
Like,
it's, yeah, exactly. There's so many things that it's like, we need to teach our kids boundaries. We need to teach them um, to not always be obedient to like adults and to not just respect them no matter what. We need
Mm-hmm.
to teach them about body safety and
mm-hmm.
consent
Consent is a
also
big one.
Yeah,
and also being able like giving them that safe environment to be able to even speak out about it because if it's already hard for a woman to speak out, like imagine how much harder, which I know you understand, but
yeah,
how much harder it is for a man to come out about another man
for sure. And
sexually
like,
assaulting them.
yeah. Um, Unfortunately, that's not where the story ends. So yeah, so I went home that day. I felt weird about it. Like I didn't really, I just knew something was off.
Yeah.
That was around the time that my family had also been like going to that like IFB home church a little bit, and
hmm
they were very quiverful. Like no Greater Joy, Mike and Debbie Pearl, all that. Um, don't condone Mike and Debbie Pearl in the slightest. They're pretty horrible people.
And quiverful is just the idea of having as many children as God will allow.
Yeah,
Correct.
Yep.
like the
Okay.
Duggars. That's why the Duggars have 19 children.
Yes.
Yep.
So, and my parents would have had more if there weren't health complications. So that was
Okay.
like a thing too.
I think the
Um,
important thing to note here also for quiverful families is a lot of them don't really care about health complications. A lot
no,
of them are, if you can get pregnant, you are
no,
going to
it's
have
just
children.
yeah,
End of
Yeah.
story.
exactly.
And that's problematic of
Yeah,
its own.
exactly. Yeah. So that happened. So there was like a book from No Greater Joy that like I honestly think even to this day that that was like a really good teaching example, and that book had like a little bit of like if someone like touches you wrong, like tell your parents or whoever. And I ended up telling my sister. My sister and I are super close to this day. I ended up telling my sister, and she was like, "That is not okay," and immediately told my dad. Like, and she was very careful, like how she approached it. My dad like went to the youth pastor, and then eventually they went to the pastor, and the pastor kind of was just like, "I'll keep an eye on him, but like, it is what it is." This kid also, my predator also like just came to church on the bus route. He wasn't like someone who was a church kid.
Hmm.
Um,
He was a
so
best
it was
kid.
like it was one of those situations where like I don't even know how much they knew about the kid.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of the way the IFB works too. Like
Hmm.
the bus kid families, like we didn't know anything about their families. They were honestly their parents were trusting us a lot too. Like they didn't know
Yeah.
anything about
Oh
us.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
The whole bus ministry, the whole idea
it grosses
is
me
a
out.
big no for me.
Yeah.
It's just like, let's go to these like low income
Hmm.
areas and take advantage of these people that want
Yeah.
like free childcare.
Who doesn't want free
Um,
childcare on the weekends in low income housing? Like,
yeah. And just like don't ask any questions apparently.
yeah.
Like go on this random bus with these random adults to this random church.
I mean, I had problems with it even when I was in fundamentalism. Like the last few years I was in fundamentalism, I really did not like the bus ministry idea. Like
Yeah.
I saw too many issues with it.
Yeah.
But I digress. Anyway, so he
Well,
kind
but
of
I honestly never like until your story, I never really thought
yeah
about it from the other perspective, right? Of like,
yeah no
we're bringing these random kids. We don't know how they're growing up. We don't know if they're being sexually assaulted in their home
yeah.
and then just
Well, and we're
repeating
not
that,
talking like
you know?
well in this situation we're not talking like elementary aged kids either. We're talking like this kid was probably 14 or 15. Like
Yeah.
he was in high school.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was just like a super uncomfortable situation. Never got dealt with. The pastor did not do anything.
Hmm.
Um, Not surprising. um,
How did that make you feel though? Like going back to it being swept under the rug and nothing happening. You had this really uncomfortable thing happen to you and nobody cared. Like how did that affect you?
I don't think it really impacted me as much at that time. I
Okay.
think it impacted me more later,
Hmm.
just because I wasn't taught that that was something wrong.
Yeah.
And mind you, too, I want to like make this very, very clear as I talk about all of this. I already like was feeling the ways I was feeling sexuality wise. Did not come from being assaulted in any way, shape, or form. Um,
Hmm.
the other things I'm going to talk about too also happened after I was already having like
The
gay
feelings. Yeah.
tendencies, gay attractions. Like,
Hmm.
I think that's a question I get asked all the time when I'm speaking with people who are fundamentalists or even like my principal from my high school that I graduated from. Her and I sat down and had a conversation recently, and she had asked me that too, and I was like, no, like I definitely already knew before all of that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
I just
because,
want to clarify
yeah.
that, like, just because you're a victim of sexual assault, like, does not make your sexuality invalid just because that happened to you.
Yep.
In
Hmm.
fact, like, people who are in the LGBT community are more likely to be sexually assaulted because I don't know if it's because they're seen as weaker or, homophobia and all of that. Like,
I
Yeah.
think it
it
depends on the
happens. It's just a
environment.
known thing.
I
Yeah.
know, especially in the IFB, they're more vulnerable. They don't have any
Mhm.
protections, they don't have any support. So,
And you always risk, yeah, with that, you always risk somebody blaming your sexuality. Um,
Yeah.
yep.
so later on, um, once I was an adult, I had a date that went very, very bad and I was sexually assaulted on it. And I had a lot of IFB people tell me after that, like, you probably liked it.
Oh my God.
Or like,
Mhm.
that's because you're gay. Things like that were said to me. Um,
That's horrid.
yeah. So I actually had a family member who said that to me right after that. And we are no longer on speaking terms.
Good for you.
I don't know if the family member and I don't know if the family member is still fundamentalist or not. But we stopped speaking over other things a few months later. And that was when I realized like they were my first predator. And I
Mm.
think that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Like I was saying, like you don't think of it as a family member, you always think of it as a stranger. Um, it was somebody who had a power dynamic over me. Um,
Within your household?
within my household, yeah. And because our relationship was already disintegrated, I'll, like almost everyone did not believe me about what had happened. Um, and that went on for years because like I had no words to describe what was going on to me. I had no inkling. And in the IFB too, like a lot of things are dealt with like as group punishments.
Mm.
Yeah.
Um, and that kind of was how we were treated at home as well. Um, if one kid did something bad, all of us got in trouble. um, so yeah, it was like a very, very hard thing to like realize later.
Mhm.
And that person has never faced consequences for their actions either.
Yeah.
I no
How
longer
often?
have a relationship with them. I've taken a step back. I've told
Yeah.
people that need to know who they
Mhm.
are to keep other children around me safe. But
Right.
Yeah.
yeah,
How often did that happen?
I'm not sure. Um, it was a situation like where that person had pretty unlimited access to me. I can remember five separate instances, I believe, four or five, four. I can believe
Okay.
I can remember four separate instances, and they were kind of spread out. Um, most of them happened around the time I was like 8 or 9. So
Okay.
yeah.
And was he ever, like, caught? Like, did anyone ever see anything or, like, did they ever walk in on
Um,
you or anything?
yes. My mom did walk in one time. But it was like just me that she like walked into the situation. Like she walked into the situation and I didn't have a shirt on. And in our family, like that was a big no-no. Like when we went
Mhm.
swimming and stuff, like we always had to wear t-shirts. Like
Yeah. Very
and instead
IFE.
of yeah. And this is like a situation that I think really sticks out in my brain is like victim blaming. Instead of asking me like, hey, like, is everything okay? She immediately was like, why don't you have a shirt on?
Mhm.
It was very much I felt like I was in trouble. And I didn't
Yeah.
even know why I didn't have a shirt on. Like I woke up to my mom walking in the room and being like, well, why is your shirt off? Um, and yeah, that was just like a really weird instance I remember. Um, other than that, like things would happen. Like I do remember something happening when someone else was in the room, but it like was where they couldn't tell. So other
Yeah.
than that, there wasn't really anything. And that person has gone on to hurt other people as well. And I do know of two other people that have had
And I'm
bad
assuming
experiences
hasn't
with them.
faced any consequences whatsoever.
No. One of his victims went through a lot on their own, with their own family. And then the other one was very much like slut shamed and victim shamed into
Oh,
keeping their mouth shut. It's their story to tell. If they want to tell their story, they can come forward. Um, I've done what I
Yeah.
could with the information I knew, and that was that.
Yeah, that balance is
But she's
hard.
never been held responsible.
That balance is hard between wanting to protect other people and then allowing them to have the space to like own their own story and own those experiences. That's a
For
really hard
sure.
balance.
I think it's one of those things too of like you can make report. I did. I made my report about what happened
Yeah.
and told them like what I knew, but those people also have to come forward and tell their stories how they want to do it. You know,
Yeah, I
whether
think the
that's
best thing
taking
that
legal.
we can do as victims is to just speak up about it and, as much as we're able to, like, tell our stories and make it known what happened to us. And in that way, I think that we can affect change and keep other people
yeah.
For
safe
sure.
while
Well,
not,
and I think
stepping
something.
on other people's toes and taking their experiences away from them.
Well, and I think something to keep in mind too with some of that is like we were very young.
Yeah.
With that person, there was no room in the IFB for experimentation. There was no room in the IFB for being different. Like that just wasn't a thing. So like
Yeah.
Yeah.
in some ways, I also like can understand certain things from that person's perspective a tiny bit of like kids are curious, kids are gonna do things. How adults react and how adults respond makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, it
Like
really does.
if an adult had had a conversation with me and that person and explained what had happened and we had had that chance to just like talk through things and like that person was given the space to talk about their feelings and emotions,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I would feel the way I feel about it.
No, that
I
makes a
think
lot of sense.
I hold the adults in the situation more responsible than I hold the person because that person was also growing up in a very sheltered environment. Like,
Yeah.
I agree with that. I mean,
yeah,
at the end of the day, there is no excuse for hurting other people. I think we can all agree
yeah,
with that. But when you're a kid in the IFB, you are not given any space to explore, to be curious, to ask questions,
no, no,
especially when it comes to your body and sex and all of those things that are natural curiosities for teenagers.
yeah,
And that is when I say that it's the culture, when I say that it's the
hmm,
culture that breeds predators, that's what I mean. Is because
yep,
nobody is given the space to have their natural curiosities or experience growing up naturally,
yeah.
Mhm.
and coming into those kinds of things.
It
So
makes
that's the culture breeds predators, and that's
mhm,
how it does it.
very much so. I think that's like a very accurate representation too. Is it's like it's something that could have been dealt with naturally and like just handled and like maybe he needed his space to explore his sexuality or whatever
Yeah.
and that
I
was
think in
not
that
there. That was not given and like
Yeah. In that situation, I also think a conversation about consent probably could have solved a lot of things. If
oh for
somebody,
sure.
the pastor or their parent, would have come to them and be like, hey, I understand this happened. I want to have a conversation with you about consent and what it means and why we need to respect other people's bodies and their space and their boundaries and ask before we touch.
Mhm.
That could have
Yeah.
prevented a lot of
Well, and
issues.
I think giving victims the space to talk about it too. Like
Yes.
Yeah.
if I had had a comfortable space to go to my parent and be like,
Mm-hmm.
this happened and I don't feel right about it, it would have been perfectly fine. And like with that family member in particular, like I always just like didn't like them. Like I didn't know
Yeah.
why. I just didn't want to be around them. And like there were other things too, like growing up as far as like I think just like the corporal punishment thing, like I said earlier, like I just don't think it was a safe space for victims to like share their stories and say, hey, like, this happened to me.
Yeah, I
I don't
think
want it to
that
happen again.
within the IFB, there's just a lot of shame surrounding sexuality at all, like
For
any
sure.
kind. And we aren't allowed to talk about any of it. Like, we just aren't.
It's
And
so
Yeah.
interesting the shift that happens though when you get married. Like you
Hmm.
have to go, especially as a woman, you have to go from complete and total abstinence
It goes
and
like the
no
hypersexuality.
information
yeah,
to you must serve your husband no
Yeah.
matter what. And you are supposed to be hypersexual all the time, every time, whenever he wants it. Like you overnight, you have to change from this, naive virgin to somebody who is able to perform at all times, no matter what.
We also just talk about how difficult that is as an LGBT person to be constantly like pushed that way too. Like,
Yeah.
oh, like you have to marry a girl and like you have to do all these things and like I remember just how daunting that was at certain times. It was like there was no other option.
Yeah.
yeah,
There was no leeway. Um, and I think navigating that was really difficult, like later on in life, and like that's a whole nother story of like coming to terms with like what I want now, you know?
yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
So
I think
when
that
did
it's
Oh, go ahead.
I think that it's obvious like that, like you said earlier, that you didn't have the words. You didn't
mhm.
have the words.
Yeah.
Like you had no idea how to tell your parents. You didn't even know
Hmm.
what was happening to you. None of it. And all of
Yeah.
that can be avoided for the most part by communicating with your children, like
Mm-hmm.
telling them about body parts, telling them about places that shouldn't be touched, and if you are, to tell your parents, to tell someone, and like consent, I feel like is a huge thing to avoid so many of these issues. Like I
Hmm.
know when it comes to my story, had he asked, I possibly would have been fine with it, right?
Yeah.
And it's like you just have to ask. Like, you know what I mean? And you also can find someone who's interested in doing things with you too. You don't have to go the route of
Yeah.
un like, you know what I mean? Like,
But all
Hmm.
of it in the IFB is taboo. Like even consensual touching or consensual sex when you're a teenager in the IFB or anything outside of marriage is taboo, and it's held to the same level, honestly, maybe even above in some situations, as non consensual sex or non consensual touching, anything like that.
well,
Well,
but
and I
that's
think,
what makes it so like it's just that's what I was saying earlier is that it's so shameful that
Mm-hmm.
like any type of experimentation at all is so looked down upon. And because of that, people resort to doing all these other things when it's like, had you asked me, we probably could have messed around or whatever.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Had you asked, we could have kissed, whatever it is.
I
But
will say
because,
caveat, like within people of your own age group, like if you're 30 and you
Yeah.
ask
exactly,
a 12-year-old if
Okay.
you can kiss them, there's something wrong with you.
for
Yeah.
sure, yes.
I also think too, like an important thing that the IFB majorly misses, and generic Christianity majorly misses, is the difference in how like groups deal with like predators and things too. I think there's a major misconception in the IFB that like the LGBT community like just allows rampant like sexual assault and stuff like that. No. Let me make it very clear. The IFB allows rampant sexual assault. LGBT people will deal with it. A classic example of this was like there was a queen that she was accused of like um just doing things like it wasn't even anything physical, it was all like electronic, like soliciting things out of people that she shouldn't have been and stuff. No longer does she have bookings. They deleted her from the entire season. Everyone knows what she does. Everybody talks about it. It is not a hidden thing. It is not something that was just like oh, that's uncomfortable, we're going to ignore it. No, those uncomfortable conversations happened. She got blacklisted. Nobody will do anything with her anymore.
Hmm.
The IFB, on the other hand, covers sexual assault up. They hide them, they deal with them. And I think that's an important conversation to have. Like, yes, it's not that, like, bad people will stop existing. It's how do you handle the bad people? How do you
Yeah.
Yes.
handle when those situations happen? And what happened in that situation doesn't even hold a candle to anything that physically happens with other things, you know?
Right.
Yeah. It also, yeah, it really does. It seriously breeds like these abusers just because they're not given that chance to explore their sexuality, and because we're so shamed of like this isn't right, we shouldn't be feeling these things not until you're married, and it's very natural for us to feel these things, and it's okay. Like it's okay to want to kiss someone. It's okay to be attracted to someone, but we have to learn about consent. We have to learn about our bodies. We have to learn about sex. We have to learn about safety. Let's like how many times have we had people get pregnant because they don't know how to be safe? Because we've never spoken about sex.
Yep.
Somehow they know how to have sex, but they don't know how to have safe sex, right? Like to not become pregnant.
You know, there's an easy cure for that. It's called being gay.
That's true. Except the gay ones. They get away with it.
So, Jay, talk about like current state. What does your life look like after the IFB? When did you officially leave? Let's start with that.
Yeah. Um, Officially, I left in 2015, like, we left physically. I
Okay.
wouldn't say, like, I fully, like, was done with fundamentalism and everything until 2019, when that situation kind of fully had played out with that family member, and I just saw, like, how things were handled, and I was like, I'm not gonna deal with this anymore.
Yeah.
That's also like I came out at the same time, so it was a whole
Just get it
process
all
to
done at
go.
once. Might as
Just
well.
get it all done at once. Leave the IFB. Stop talking to half your family. Come out. It's a whole fun trilogy. Um, and then I moved to Arizona. I got my degree in hospitality management.
Love that.
Um, Now I am in real estate. I'm also a performing drag queen. Absolutely love my life. It's fun. Um, I was always into theater and like the arts and stuff in high school. And I just had so much fun doing that. So as an adult, I get to play dress up and it just costs a lot more money. So that's kind of where I'm at currently. I'm single, so if there's any gay ex-bunnies listening, like hit me up.
Email us. We will
Otherwise,
send you his profile. No.
exactly.
So what about religiously? Where are you at religiously after leaving the IFB?
Yeah. Religiously, I've kind of been all over the place since I left the IFB. I think at first, like, I was very, so when I left fundamentalism, like, I was very much like, when we left Willamette, I did not buy into any of it. I was very, like, atheistic, like, I don't want to believe any of this.
Hmm.
Um, After a few years in just like non-denominational Christian school, I was pretty sold out into that. Like I was very like involved. Um, I was on worship team the whole nine yards. Like I was a youth
Yeah.
leader. Um,
I feel like after leaving like the fundy churches,
Very,
more like contemporary stuff is like, oh, I could do this.
yeah,
Well, it's
exactly,
also fun because they have drums and you can dance a
Yeah.
little bit. Like
exactly.
it's fun.
Yeah. um, and that was kind of a 50-50 bag. I had people that like were very much like fine with me being gay. I had people that weren't.
Mhm.
Um, After I came out, it was like that too. Like, yeah. And then 2020, when COVID struck, and just like everything we were seeing, divisiveness, politics wise, and stuff, like, I was just over it with Christianity. I had had it.
Yeah.
So nowadays, I would say I'm pretty agnostic. I do believe in a higher power. I'm not a huge fan of organized religion. If I'm really feeling just
We
like
aren't either.
lonely, what was that?
We aren't either.
Nope.
Exactly. So yeah, so like if I'm feeling like I really want that community and that church aspect, it's like there's a Methodist church, which the Methodist church is fully affirming. They just like really made a hard stance on it. They overwhelmingly approve like gay clergy and gay deacons and all that.
Oh, we love
So
that.
there's a Methodist church here that like a bunch of like lesbians and other people that I know that are all Christian, like they all go there. So like I'll go there occasionally and like that's just my way of connecting
Yeah.
to myself and to everything around me. I don't
Yeah.
ever foresee myself returning to like mainstream Christianity. I just don't think it's something I could do at this point.
Yeah.
Um
I think
yeah.
it's something to bring up is just like we as humans, we require that connection. You know, we require like
We are social animals. We need some
yes,
sort of community.
exactly. And whether religious or not, like we
Yep.
need it. And so I think that's
Yeah.
something that the church I guess does right is just like the
Mhm.
community. But
And I think that's a
obviously it's
beautiful,
very toxic.
yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing of coming out and like being a part of the LGBT community too. Yes, there is a lot of divisiveness in the LGBT community, don't get me wrong. But like your chosen family and stuff, like you get people around you that like they're closer than anyone in the church ever really was because we all knew that there were secrets between all of
Yeah.
us. And having people that you can just like live super authentically around and you know they're living really authentically, it's just like it's a really beautiful thing. And I
Yeah.
think like that's a huge thing for me now as an adult too, is like if somebody lies to me, they're done. Like
Yeah.
you lie to me about the wrong thing, like we're never gonna have a relationship again. Um and I don't really have anybody in my life that I have to worry about that with. Um
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, I think it's nice to get to that point where
yeah,
you're finally able to be yourself. You don't get judged for
Existing.
stupid things. Exactly.
yeah, for sure.
And yeah, it's amazing like to be able to find a good community and like that's kind of what I'm hoping we make through this podcast is like
Yeah.
finding people that we can relate to with our past and stuff and have these deep conversations, but
Hmm.
also move forward with a beautiful community that is accepting and understands that even if someone doesn't see something the same way you do, it doesn't mean that they're bad or evil or whatever, right? We hold a space for each other,
Yeah.
right? And
Well,
um
yeah, and I think it's also beautiful to see too, like even amongst our group of friends and like the people we all grew up around, like seeing how even if we are in different places and spaces with like where we're at in our religious journey or personal journeys, like seeing us all like have common ground in that, like yes, it was something that hurt, but like being able to turn it into something beautiful and something that like connects us all, like I don't know. I think that's really awesome too, and like being able to see that is really cool.
I
yeah.
think it's something we never really got. Like it's something we never
Yeah.
really got as kids is I honestly it's an illusion of community in the church. We were
Hmm.
talking to another ex fundy earlier this week and really talking about the illusion of community that's something that I think a lot of us miss
Yeah.
about the IFB is that community, but was it ever really real? Like if we can't be
Yeah.
ourselves and we can't just
That
exist
part.
as ourselves, was it ever really real? Like that
Hmm.
sense of community? I don't think so. I think it's manufactured. And
Yeah.
I feel even though my community now is so much smaller, it's so much more authentic
Hmm.
and it's so much more supportive. And I feel so much more, I have much more a sense of community now than I ever did in the IFB.
Yep.
With, I mean,
Totally
maybe
agree with you.
half a dozen close friends, like
Yeah.
In all real, in all real, like I only have maybe half a dozen like people that I would consider to be close friends, and that's plenty for me because the support that I get from those people is exactly what I need in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And I
real.
think like,
It's real.
yeah, because we were all hiding stuff from each other all the time.
Oh
Mhm.
yeah,
Everybody slapped on a smile and, you know,
Yeah,
it's
I think it's
survival.
cool. I think it's cool that you're able to come out with like friends from
mhm.
high school and
That's
everything
a
from
very
elementary.
rare
Yeah.
experience. I don't
Yeah,
think a
because
lot of us were able.
I
I
definitely
didn't.
I didn't keep
I
like
definitely
anyone.
didn't think I would. That's the thing
Yeah.
too. Like I remember leaving Willamette. I didn't think I would ever speak to any of those people ever again.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Now, like my closest friends are those people that we went through it together.
Yeah.
Mm.
Um,
I love
I guess
that.
I do. I guess I do have one best
and we're
friend
all in
still.
such yeah, and we're all in such different places too. Like it's really
Yeah.
funny. Like we all have different religious views. One of us has a kid. One of us is pregnant. One of
Mhm.
us is like, I'm freshly single. One of my friends has been through a divorce. Like, we've all been through so many different things, and we're like all our own people and have
Yeah.
our own experiences. But like,
You
it's
show
so
up.
beautiful to like see that connection. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I love it. All right, so we have one last question for you. Christy, do you want to ask it?
Jay, we're gonna ask this for to all of our guests, but you're the first. And I'd like to ask you, what is your cult confession?
My cult confession is that if you groom your child into being a straight fundamentalist Christian all of their life, they too can turn into a flaming, fabulous drag diva.
Jazz hands for that. Yes.
We love
I'm
to
here
see
for
it.
it. All right.
Well,
Well, I think that is it for today. Thank you so much, Jay, for showing up and for being our guinea pig
Yeah,
as we
thank you guys.
navigate
I
all of these
appreciate it.
things. So we're really excited. We have a few more guests lined up, hopefully soon, to talk about some of their experiences as well. So remember to like, subscribe, share, all of the things. Click all the buttons. Thank you. And if you would like to be a guest on Cult Confessions, please email us at cultconfessionskjv@gmail.com and we will get started. Share your story.
if you have been affected by religious trauma or abuse, we want to hear your story.
Even if you're not ready to share publicly, we would be happy to listen and support you on your journey, free of judgment or pressure.
Please email us at cultconfessionskjv@gmail.com to get started.
We believe you.